I'm going to begin by stamping the phrase that I'm going to use on the front of my card. From the Best Year stamp set, I've chosen the phrase that says, "Thank you for all that you are." I'm going to ink it with my Memento ink, and then I'm going to stamp it somewhere near the center of this layer. Doesn't have to be perfect. That works just fine. I'm going to set this aside for a bit since I have my ink ready to go. The next thing I'm going to do is take 3 of the images from the Painted Poppies stamp set. I'm going to ink them up and stamp them onto vellum. If you remember in the last video, I told you that vellum takes a while to dry. Well, in this case, it's a bit of an advantage, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I'm going to start with my big poppy. Then I'm going to do the smaller poppy. And then I'm going to stamp the leaf 3 times, and I'm going to ink up the leaf in between each time I stamp, because I want the ink to be nice and dark. Now, what I'm going to do is bring in my clear embossing powder. Now, the reason that I'm using embossing powder for my vellum is it'll help it to dry really fast. So I'm going to sprinkle the clear embossing powder onto all of the stamped images, and then I'm going to tap off the excess like so. And now I'm going to go over to my heat tool, which is plugged in over at the wall, and I'm going to heat emboss the vellum. Now, when you heat emboss vellum, you have to be very careful that it doesn't warp or burn, which it can do very quickly. So what I'll do is I'll put my heat tool and then pull it away. I'll put my heat tool on it and pull it away, and so on and so forth until all the images are heat embossed. So I'll be back in a minute and we'll move on to the next step. All right, I have my images all embossed, heat embossed, and now I'm ready to do some coloring. I decided to use the darker colors of the Poppy Parade and Granny Apple Green, and then the same for the basic black. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn your vellum over and you're going to color on the back side of the vellum. And that way the colors will have more of a frosted effect on the images that you have stamped and embossed. So let me just do the very first poppy, and then what I'll do is I'll stop the video and go ahead and color the rest of the images and then get set up for the next step in this card making process. So I'm going to do the Poppy Parade, and then let me flip it over so you can see. You can see that it's quite pale, which is fine. That's what happens. That's the stained glass effect. But I also want the center of my poppies to be really dark. And so I'm actually going to go over them, the already stamped part, with my basic black so that the center of the poppy is nice and dark. So I'll go ahead and I will finish coloring all of these images, and then I'll come back and we'll move on to the next step. I have finished coloring all of the images. What I forgot to mention is when you use Stampin' Blends to color, it dries instantly on the back of vellum, so you don't have to worry about setting it to dry for a while or heat embossing it again. It absorbs instantly into the vellum paper, and it's ready for your next steps of the project. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the coordinating framelits, the Painted Labels dies. I've already pulled them out. I love that Stampin' Up! Now includes more than one of the dies for the leaves so that you can do a quick die cutting when it comes to making cards. I'm going to just move these aside for a second. I'm going to bring in my die cutting and embossing machine. And I am going to lay my vellum on. Get a few things out of the way here. And I'm going to match up the dies onto the vellum, and I'm going to die cut them out. Now obviously, because I have 3 leaves and only 2 dies, I'm going to have to die cut the leaf, the last leaf image, as a second pass through. So I think what I'll do is I'll take this one off right now, and I will die cut 2 of the leaves and 1 of the poppies. Just get everything lined up. And then I'll have to do a second pass through to die cut the second poppy and the last leaf. I have the elements all ready to add some dimension to the front of my card. And there's one more thing that I want to do. I'm going to push those aside for a minute. I'm going to bring in my paper cutter and my phrase. What I want to do is I want to separate the thank you from the for all that you are. And I'm going to do that by, I'm just going to turn it around, by putting it on my paper cutter, lining it up, and then cutting the phrase apart. And then what I'll do is I'll just trim either side and the top. And then I will end up with 2 strips for my phrase that'll be ready for the front of my card. The elements are all ready, and so now it's time to put the card together. So I'm going to start with my card layer, and I'm going to add the strip of designer series paper. Again, I've chosen a strip of the Trimming the Town designer series paper. You can use whichever paper really makes your heart sing. I use this piece because I love polka dots, and I thought it would be fun to match the color of the Poppy Parade. So I'm going to adhere this strip on. Then I'm going to take the thank you and I'm going to add that towards the top of my card layer. And then I'm going to add the second part of the phrase towards the bottom. Oh, my adhesive just stopped working. Hang on a second. There we go. I'm going to add that to the bottom, like so. And then I'm going to add my elements. So I decided that I'm going to use the a large Stampin' Dimensional behind the big poppy. And you can see the reason that I colored it black on the back side was so that you wouldn't be able to see the dimensional, there we go, underneath the poppy. And then I think what I'll do is take a small dimensional and put it on the back side of the smaller poppy. And I'll add that one over to this side like so. And then I think what I'll do is I'll bring in my card base before I add any more bits and pieces to my card. Let's get it all put together first. Usually I add elements towards the end of the process. Okay, and then I'm going to adhere it flat. You could pop it up with some more Stampin' Dimensionals if you wanted to. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of the adhesive to the back of my leaves. And then one more. And there you are. The third and final card is complete. I hope that you've enjoyed learning how to create vellum dimensions to add to your cards in the future. I'm Terry. I am nuts about stamping. Thanks very much for taking my class. Bye for now.